My favorite joke? Oh my goodness. Did you hear about the cow that drank moo? No, wait a minute, that's backwards. I got it backwards. Did you hear about the cow that drank ink and mooed indigo? That's an old song called Mood Indigo, way back from the 50s. I grew up in southern Alberta, in Cardston, Alberta. I was there until when I was about 10 years old. We had hollyhocks in our backyard. It's an old-fashioned flower that opens like a cup, and they're all different colors. One day I was with my cousin Rita Matkin, and I said, let's pick up some bumblebees while we're in the backyard. I think I was maybe 6 or something like that. So we went into the backyard with a jar, and we would hold the hollyhock over the jar, and then the bee would fly into the jar, and we put the lid on. And I said, well, we're going to take these inside and show them to my mother. I was so excited, took them into the house, and she said, Marilyn Ann, bumblebees don't like to be in glass jars. They like to be out where they're free. So I said, oh, okay. So I opened the lid in the kitchen, and out went all these big, beautiful bumblebees all over the kitchen. My cousin Rita screamed, and she ran out of there. And my mother very calmly said, all right, go around and we'll open the windows, and we'll calmly wait till they all leave. And they did, but they were beautiful. They were fuzzy and yellow, bright yellow, like the baby chicks that I like. My cousin Rita and I spent a lot of time together. She was 2 or 3 years younger than I was, and we were at her dad's ranch, and the men were thrashing. They were in the fields cutting down the wheat, getting it ready to bale. So after they'd eat lunch and they worked really hard, Uncle Davoo went out on the screened-in porch, and he's out there just sleeping away, and we climbed a little hill just above where the house was, and we were lying there looking up at clouds and thinking how peaceful and fun it was, and all of a sudden we heard swish in the grass, and it was a snake. And my cousin's wide-eyed again. She said, look. And I said, I know, don't worry. So I picked up this snake in the middle. He was about that fat around. And I said, just follow me back to the house. My Uncle Davoo used to always tease me and made fun of me because I didn't know how to milk a cow. I just couldn't get the hang of it at all. So I thought, this is my chance to get even. So I went out on the screen porch, and I dangled this snake over his nose, and he did this. He thought it was a fly or something. I did it a couple of times, and the third time, he opened his eyes and saw what was happening. And Rita said, we gotta get out of here quick. And she said, climb up on top of the chicken coop. He can't get you up there because he's too fat. And so I ran like crazy, and I climbed up on top of this. It had logs that crisscrossed, so it was kind of like a step thing. Got up on top of there, and Uncle Davoo looked up there at me, and he said, you just wait. You just wait, young lady. I was scared, but I was also having a good time. So they went back out in the field, and when they came in that night, it was after supper, actually, and they were sitting around in the family room and on this braided rug, and my Uncle Davoo said, you'll never guess what happened to me today. And he told the story, and they all laughed, and he said, I have to say that was a pretty good one. I think she got a good one over on me. We were having another family reunion, and there was an old horse named Blue, Old Blue, and she'd kind of seen her days. We were all going to take rides on her this afternoon. My cousin Lynn, we lined up and we decided, because it was getting kind of late, we'd both get in the saddle at the same time. It was a Western saddle that's kind of shaped like this. So we were pretty squished in there, but we fit. Now I had on a skirt, and it couldn't really go in there, so I let it flow behind me. And Lynn had jeans on, and she was sitting in front. And we thought this horse wouldn't go very fast at all. It was like he turned around and saw what all this pile of girls was on his back. And he took off, and I said, Lynn, stop the horse, stop the horse. She said, I can't. And we got the giggles, and I wet my pants. And I couldn't stop that either. Lynn was the one who got teased because she got urine all over her jeans. And I had nothing because I had this skirt that had just flown back there. And they said, Lynn. She said, Marilyn did that, I didn't do it. And I went like this. Look, I'm just completely dry here. I started piano when I was 5. I went through 3 teachers in Cardston while I was there. And the first teacher used to wrap my knuckles with a pencil if I didn't keep my fingers curved. I said to my own students, I say quite frequently, you know, if I'd done that to you, you would divorce me, wouldn't you? Yes, Mrs. Tolk, we would right away. And then I went to Sister Smith, who baked bread while I was having a lesson. She'd say, I'm going in the kitchen, I just have to punch down this bread, but I can hear you very well from where we are. And I said to her quite frequently, when I had a new piece, I'd say, Sister Smith, would you play that for me? Would you play that piece for me? So she'd sit down and play it, and I had it by then because I had a good ear. And so I'd go home and I wouldn't practice because I already knew it. And she thought that I was just reading music and everything was going well. The third teacher was Mrs. Smith, whose husband was an actor. And if I had a good lesson, we would play Chinese checkers. That's why we have a Chinese checker game. And so I liked her best of all. But when I started out going to boarding school, the first teacher I had said, young lady, you don't read music, do you? And I said, no, I really don't. She said, you're going to have to start all over. And, you know, that brought me to tears. And she said, but if you'll be patient and you'll work hard, she said, you're going to become great. It's going to be a good experience for you. And I did that, and then I went to her teacher, who was probably the best teacher in Canada, and things just flew after that. From that time, I went to boarding school in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I was in boarding school for about 7.5 years in 3 different boarding schools. The first one was St. Hilda's School for Girls, and we wore uniforms. We had tunics, and we had dark ties, black stockings, and black shoes. And I was there for 3 years and was doing pretty well with piano at that time. And I lived in a Catholic convent for 2 years, Sacred Heart Convent. Well, my favorite nun was Mother Agatha. And Mother Agatha wore these thin glasses that were like that, but they were very thick lenses. But she had a wart on the side of her cheek right here like this. I thought she was wonderful. I thought she was a little strange looking, but I learned a lot from her. We went to benediction every Sunday evening. One Sunday evening I decided I wasn't going to go. I was in my teens at this time. I was practicing for a competition coming up, a music festival, and I really needed this special time. So my cousin and a couple of girls came and knocked on the door of the music studio and said, Marilyn, it's time for benediction. And they brought my head to wear a veil, a black veil on the back of my head, and I didn't have it with me because I hadn't planned to go. And I said, well, I'm not going. I've got a piano lesson tomorrow, and it's the last one before the music festival. So they said, you're going to get it. I said to myself, I'll have to take that chance. So my cousin and friends went to benediction. And the next morning I was called into the Reverend Mother's office, and all the nuns were in there sitting on chairs around, and she said, young lady, I hear that you didn't go to benediction last night. And I said, no, ma'am, I didn't. And she said, and why was that you didn't go? And I told her, I said, I'm not a member of your faith. I'm a Mormon, Latter-day Saint, and I go to Mass every morning, and I observe Lent and go to benediction, but I have an important competition next weekend, and I needed this time at the piano, And they just muttered amongst themselves, and then my friend, Mother Agatha, stood up, and she said, she looked at the nuns around, and she said, if playing the piano and loving music as much as this girl does is not serving God, then I don't know what is. And she swept out of that room, and I looked as she went out, and I thought, the wart kind of disappeared off her cheek. From then on, I had a really great relationship with her, learned a lot, and we learned from each other. I don't know what the nuns learned because they were stunned by what happened that day. So we needed to find another place for me to go to school. So I went to Mount Royal College, which was a college for young men and young women, and it was an engineering program for the men, and I carried on with my music. I didn't really do much sports because I spent most of the time at the piano, which was what I needed to do. I can remember trying to stand on my head once, and that didn't work out, and some of the girls said, Marilyn, I don't think you better try that one again. The king and queen, during all of the years when I would be home for Christmas and everything, would always give a speech on Christmas Day. And they were dressed up and they talked about the economy and the growth of Canada and how they were proud of that. I used to play the piano for all of the classical artists that would come to Calgary. I would play O Canada and God Save the Queen or King, whichever. It was King George first and then Queen Elizabeth. And it filled my heart with pride to have that kind of loyalty to our country and unity. I guess it was my mother, who was a school teacher, well known all over southern Alberta, who taught every class, who said to me one day when I was little, and I've never forgotten it, never go any place empty-handed. And I've remembered that when I go downstairs, when I go upstairs, if something needs to go up there, I take it then. I don't wait till later. I decided that was a lesson in life, not to go any place empty-handed. Always have a thought, do something really fun. We met in Washington, D.C. It was at a youth conference there, and a friend of mine, we'd gone as a group from New York City. I went to church each Sunday with friends, and my friend Vic said, hey, I'd like you to meet a friend of mine who goes to school in Boston. He's sitting right over there at that table. So we walked over, and he said, Norman, I'd like you to meet Miss Neubauer, Marilyn Neubauer. Grandpa was sitting at a table with a napkin open, doing a physics equation with a friend, and they were looking down at this, writing away. He looked up at me and he said, oh, hi, how are you? But if you balance it this way, it comes out different. And here's what happens. And I thought, I don't know that I ever need to see this guy again. He's a complete nerd. And then of course he came to New York, and we met at a fireside. And New York apartments were really small. We would crowd in, we wore heels that were like this, I mean. And a lot of the girls took theirs off, so there was more room. They didn't jab anybody. And mine got wedged underneath the sofa in this place, and I couldn't find him. Everybody else had gone except me, and Norman was in the kitchen probably talking physics with somebody, I don't really know, but he came into there, and there I was down crawling around trying to find these shoes. When he asked me what I'd lost, and I said, my shoes. And so he helped me, and we found them out, and then he said, well, can I walk you home? I'd like to take you home if it be possible. So he did, and a couple of weeks later, he and his roommate invited me and my roommate over for dinner at their apartment. We were a little skeptical about this. I didn't know anything about this guy except what I'd seen in Washington and helping me with a pair of shoes. So we went over to their apartment, and the pork chops were frozen, and the potatoes needed to be peeled, and the carrots needed to be sliced. We spent the time at the sink preparing their dinner. And we had some weird dates, I must say. But we had a lot in common. We found out we both loved music. I have to tell you about the first time he held my hand. We were at Radio City. The Rockettes came out and danced and did everything, the legs this way and the legs that way and everywhere. And he was wearing a khaki-colored raincoat, and his hand slid over here and took hold of my hand, and it was like electricity. And the first kiss he gave me was on my forehead, and it was outside my roommate's apartment where I stay on the weekends. Again, the same thing. It felt like, it felt like really hot on that spot there, and it was really good. So we went to see Stravinsky's Firebird. I had been at the Institute all week teaching blind children and cerebral palsy and all that, and I wasn't feeling good. I talked to the headmistress there, and she said, "Your hands are burning up." And they were really hot. I said, "Oh, I'll be fine." I really wanted to go out with this unusual guy. So I met him in New York, and we went to the symphony. And when we got back to the apartment, my roommate was not there. And I had 103 fever, and he proposed to me. And he said, "I think I caught her in a weak moment." And we didn't get married until Christmas. This was like in the spring. We had different kind of weddings than they have nowadays. And we were in the Relief Society room, in the way back beyond the basketball court, and they fixed things up there, and just a few people and very few pictures, but they're special. Then we got on a bus and drove 23 hours to Idaho to have a reception down there. Then we went back to final exams, both of them. We had 2 babies in a small apartment, and I was still teaching piano, and Grandpa was going to school, getting a PhD. One day I had a friend over, and we both had babies. I had a funny idea. It was kind of like the snake idea. I changed Jeffrey's diaper. We did clay modeling. We made greenware and then baked it and so forth. And I had a big blob of brown modeling clay like this, and I said, "Phaon, what if?" So we had the diaper, and I put this big blob of poo on this diaper, and Grandpa came home. We're trying not to laugh, I said, "The strangest thing happened while we were at school today." I said, "You need to come into the bedroom and see." And he went into the bedroom, and he looked at this big pile of poo, and he said, "Did Jeffrey do all that?" And then we burst into laughter, And the young students, we used to get together. We didn't have much money, and so we would trade points for babysitting. And if one person in the group had only a few points, you'd know that's the person you need to call so they could catch up on their points, And we spent $10 a week on groceries. We went to Harlem. The border was right near where we lived, and they had a big co-op there. A lot of different nationalities there. And there was nothing to worry about at all. Nothing, It's just great. We had a nice apartment and had lots of friends. We kept active in church. We had jobs. I played the organ quite often. We put on plays. We had a play about the building fund, and we had a Christmas play based on Dickens' Christmas Carol. Instead of Tiny Tim, it was Weenie Will. And Weenie Will was a big, tall guy, and then Stooge, and it was like, "Yes, yes, Stooge, we issue a challenge. Money has been your pitfall. Dig it out from underneath your mattress, and donate it to church. All your currency potentially is useful," and so on. I've forgotten the rest of it. We did stuff like that and Halloween things on the subway. The first time I played Monopoly with Grandpa, I lost and I cried. He said, "Marilyn, it's just a game." I say, "I know, it's just a game that you just won." We are best friends. I hope he heard that. I know he heard it. Our differences resolve quickly, and that's the way it needs to be. That's the only way it can be, is to love one another and apologize if you say a dumb thing. We, as a young married couple, used to have arguments and stuff, you know, like that. And as we got older and older, it did surprise me that those things didn't matter and that they weren't important. And the most important thing was to be together in everything we did, and it brought us close together as the years grew. And we have some friends who sing a song when we have parties. It's called You Grow Better with Time. And that's become our favorite song, You Become Better. And then the one will say, no, you become better with time. No, you, you. And so, just like, so that was a surprise, a happy surprise for me. Most proud of? All my family, all my grandchildren, and our sons and daughters have all married so well. I guess the top of the pyramid is this guy next. I'm proud of him. He gives me a lot of really good advice. And you all have your own talents.
What is the key to a good life?
Butter. I hope you're hearing that next door. No, the key to good life is loving people and loving them unconditionally. You know, maybe some things you don't necessarily agree with what's going on, but you love them for who they are and what they represent. Say that's going out to the family. I want you to know, here we go, Jeffrey and Astrid, Whitman and Leo, and Marissa and Michael, how much I love you and admire all you're doing. And David and Lisa, Julia and Tanner and her great career, and Mackenzie, Andrew and Jackson, the card shark, Jeffrey, Brendan, an incredible life they have. And then we have Rebecca, the hub of the family. She listens to everybody. And Dan, fabulous oral surgeon. Reese, piano. Rachel, with her great insight, far beyond 16 years. And Holden is doing well on his mission. And then we have got Amy and Kirk, art everywhere, and what a great talent there. And Amy going to school, and she's a great money manager, great business manager at home, and still manages to spend time with Kate and Jack, Brian, and Megan, who are all doing well. And Megan's pursuing a degree in personal training, I think, isn't she? And then Brian's doing music. And Whitman, they've got a little band going. And Leo, oh my good night. There is a kid and a half with French and all the other things he does. And he's so cute with that mop of curly dark hair. And then there's Jeffrey, who's making the most of his life. Bentley and Jennifer, Bountiful, Utah, with Madeline and Anna. And of course Jackson, and now Olivia from the Brooks family. Bentley, you were a child when you were little. You used to leave notes by the toaster. And when I was making sandwiches, say, I love you, Mom, have a great day. All these cute little notes. And then there's precious Madeline and Anna with their talents at piano and violin. And Mom also. Everybody's doing everything. Yeah, I say long prayers in the morning to try and make sure I remember everybody. Love you all so much. I'm honored to be your grandmother and your mother, wife, great-grandmother. Okay, I better stop before I get in any more trouble. I know I'm not in trouble. I think I covered it. You all have your great talents.